Hello, fellow citizens of the Dark City, and welcome to this Index In-Depth for the Drukhari. This is part of a new series that we at 6 Gaming are going to be running, where we go through the indexes and unpack them for you in two parts to get you the lowdown on all the new abilities you've got and how to play your army in early 10th edition. I've started with the Drukhari because they're my all-time favorites. I love the Drukhari, my personal favorite faction, and I'm really excited to take you through what makes them special and how they're going to work in 10th edition 40k. In part one, we're going to think about the faction rules, the detachment rules, the enhancements and the stratagems. And then in part two, we'll be looking at some of the units and what you might want to run in your Drukhari lists. So let's start with the faction rule. It's an appropriate one. It's power from pain. This used to be a scaling table, but now it's a resource that you generate and spend in-game. A Drukhari army starts the game with 3 pain tokens at 2,000 points, and you earn additional ones by destroying enemy units or forcing enemy units to fail battle shot. Now, you can spend tokens across the game to empower your units. You do this at the start of a phase, and it gives a different buff to the unit depending on the phase in which you've done it. So if you do this in the movement phase or the charge phase, you give your unit the ability to re-roll its advance or its charge. This helps to smooth out delivery, so it's an extremely useful thing. Make sure your units get where they need to go, sort of reduces points of failure on making important charges, and helps you to get to combat in particular. So this is a very nice buff, but I think the real power is that you can use this in the shooting or combat phase to give your units full rerolls to hit. So with Drukhari shooting, which is high quality but often low volume, things like dark lances or blasters, this is absolutely massive. It means you're going to be more accurate than ever, and in combat it ensures that you can really chuck on damage and put as much hurt through as you possibly can. Now, as we'll talk about in a moment, you can also gain additional tokens via the Real Space Raid detachment. So this is a very nice rule, and you can use it in all sorts of ways. So I think the key thing with this is that you'll be able to generate a massive amount of pain tokens across the game, but it'll be quite limited, particularly into armies with low numbers of units and elite armies, which is kind of thematic. That's kind of where it should be, perhaps, at its weakest. So the detachment rule, that's a Real Space Raid. With a Real Space Raid, you are able to gain an additional pain token if you bring an Archon, a Succubus, or a Homunculus. So for 1 for each of these. So if you bring these, you'll be starting the game on 6 if you've got 1 of each, which is a really generous provision to start the game with. It wasn't clear in the review stage whether Lilith and Urian Rakarth would generate pain tokens, but they have now gained the Succubus and Homunculus keywords, so they will be able to generate pain tokens, which is absolutely massive because they both look great and you may well want to use them. So the Real Space Raid, very simple detachment, nothing too much to see there, but getting you additional pain tokens at the start is massive and really, really helpful. Next up, we've got the enhancements. I'd say these are a mixed bag. There's some situational ones. They're split across Archon, Homunculus, Succubus, and some of these are definitely better than others. You've got the Art of Pain. This is an all-rounder. The character in question generates a pain token in your command phase if they're on the board. Really nice. Just keep those pain tokens coming in. Keep on amping up your damage or making your charges. And this is probably nice on a foot character that's going to slug around the board. So maybe a Homunculus with some racks, something like that. Very useful, very consistent. You've also got Labyrinthine Cunning, which gives you CP regen of a 4-up on an Archon's unit. Very handy, very, very good to have the Archon unit paying for itself as it does the things it wants to do. Then you've got a couple that are more situational. So the Blood Dancer enhancement gives your Succubus improved AP and attacks, and more if she's empowered. This is okay. The Succubus, as you will see later on, is a little bit less dangerous than she used to be. So this isn't necessarily as effective as it might have been in the past. And you also have Crucible of Malediction, which allows your Homunculus to force a battle shock test within an aura, which also hurts enemy psychers that fail. So this is a super thematic one. Not sure how widely applicable it is, though it is obviously very nice into particular armies like Thousand Suns or Tyranids, something where there's a lot of psychers running around. So an interesting spread, a couple of very useful ones in there, but some situational ones as well. Next up, we have the stratagems. And I think the good news is that everything in here is useful. It's split again across Cabal, Witch Cult, and Coven, which does mean that you're going to be sort of corralled in particular directions with it, but everything here is nice. Most of them are 1 CP. The only one that isn't is the first one here, which is Strike and Fade. Now, this is a fire and fade, so that means that you can shoot and then make a normal move. Very, very powerful on our fast ranged units. It means they can position, get up the board, take ground really, really nicely. 2 CP makes it quite expensive, but it is invaluable for a fragile shooting army like us. Next up, you've got Prey on the Weak. This is only 1 CP, and this gives a Cabal unit full rerolls to wound against a target unit which is below half strength. I think with the way pain tokens play now, you're going to be amping up a bunch of shooting units and trying to hose down hard targets. So this is really nice for that moment where, say you fired a Ravager or something and you put a Dreadnought on like a few wounds and you just need to push that last bit of damage through. Making sure your Cabal reroll their wounds, get through the high toughness, finish the job. Really nice. Quite limited with the sort of half strength rider on it, but still I think going to be used a lot, especially if you go heavy into Cabal shooting, which, spoilers, does look very good right now. Next up, we've got my favorite, which is Insensible to Pain. This is a -1 to wound on Coven units. I really like this. I think this is a very strong, reliable 1 CP stratagem. Being able to make your Talos really durable in combat or at range, being able to help your Racks or Grotesques stick around on an objective when they're being targeted is really, really nice. And -1 to wound is a very powerful tool to have, very flexible in where you put it, and I think you'll use this a lot. Next up, we have Acrobatic Display. This gives Witch Cults advance and charge. So Drukhari have lost that army wide now, so we're a little bit slower, but it does mean you can still get advance and charge onto a crucial Witch Cult unit, Hellions or Reavers or a squad of Witches disembarking when you need it to get that added bit of speed. And it feels appropriate that Witch Cults would still be very quick, even if some of the other parts of the army have got a little bit slower. So very nifty, all-round useful stratagem. Next up, we've got Alliance of Agony. And this is quite a situational one, but it allows you for 1 CP to essentially empower all 3 of a unit with a Succubus, an Archon, and a Homunculus in it in the same combat. So when this happens, it's going to be massive because you can just slap rerolls to hit across all of these dangerous units, make sure they punch through their target and get the job done. I think the setup, we'll have to see how the game plays, but it's not all the time that you're going to be yeeting all 3 of your combat units into one target. So we'll have to see how often this is useful. But I think for clutch things like taking down a big knight or something, for example, this might well be very useful, but it's maybe a little bit more situational than some of the other ones. Finally, the classic, the Eldari classic, Quicksilver reactions. This is lightning fast reflexes again, basically. -1 to hit, combat or shooting. Very useful to be able to put this in different places. Very useful to try and keep your units alive, swing off a bit of enemy shooting, make those hard shots miss. And always useful to have in a Drukhari army. So it's a good set. I think dividing across Cabal, Witch Cult, and Coven does limit us a little bit. Some of the other indexes are more flexible in where you can put things. And I think the avenues you can go down with this will feel quite limited, and you'll find the options and the combos pretty quickly. But they're all nice to have, and they all make the units we have do what they want to do better. And that's what a good stratagem should do. Thank you very much for watching part 1, guys. I'll be back in part 2 to talk about units. You can check out all sorts of index in-depths on the 6++ channel. Tons of content coming out across 10th edition, and we've got regular shows. At the moment, we have that 6++ show podcast, which is recording every Tuesday night, and other regularly scheduled content as well. Do hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and I'll be back again for more Drukhari mischief soon. Pray they don't take you alive.